Void Hunter has always been one of the single best builds in all of Destiny for pretty much all forms of content, and with Lightfall it somehow got even better. With one of the best supers in the game doing not only a ton of damage, but also providing that 30% debuff for all of our teammates, infinite on-demand invisibility for clutch situations and just trivializing hard mechanics, infinite healing through Devour, and of course infinite grenades, Void Hunter is a class that you'll never want to play without, especially in Contest Mode Raid and GM Nightfalls. What's up guys, my name is Nick2, and in this video I'll quickly go over everything that you guys need to know to be a near invincible Void Hunter god, making you the most reliable person on any fire team. This video is meant to be quick, so let's just get into it. If you find the video helpful, please make sure to drop a like, helps me out a ton, but regardless, let's just get into it. First off, I want to talk about exotics. We have about two options here. Personally, I think Omnioculus is absolutely the best, especially in higher end contest scenarios like the raid. Your other option is Gerfalcon. We all know what Gerfalcon does. I'm not really going to talk about it all that much. I think Gerfalcon right now is a little bit redundant because we have volatile flow, so we're going to have permanent uptime on volatile rounds anyways. I could see Gerfalcon being good in very particular scenarios, but currently I just really don't think that it's worth it, and Omnioculus provides so much that we don't really want to go away from Omnioculus. First off, anytime that we're invisible, which is pretty much going to be all the time with our aspect, making us invisible anytime we kill a volatile target. But with Omnioculus, anytime we're invisible, we're going to have 50% damage reduction. So not only are we invisible after every single kill, but we're also going to be invisible pretty much anytime that we need to be, because we're going to have 2 smoke bomb charges, and we get all of our smoke bomb back as long as we just smoke bomb at least 2 of our teammates as well. But smoke bomb is a low enough cooldown, and you get a lot of cooldown reduction through other things, that you're pretty much always going to have invisibility anytime that you need it. You'd think that the damage reduction isn't insanely valuable here, with you popping in and out of invisibility every time that you shoot your gun, but ultimately, because we're killing so many targets with volatile rounds, we're constantly going to be going in and out of invisibility, so you'll inevitably take some damage when you're popping in and out of that invisibility. And because this game can be a little bit laggy, you actually gain the damage reduction for a little bit longer than you would think. So ultimately, I just think it is absolutely the safest play, and it is an insanely good exotic. But of course, though, if you want to use your Falcon, and if you want the build to work in the future when we don't have access to volatile rounds anymore, I'll have a separate dim loadout link to that build as well. The third exotic is Orpheus Rig. Just make sure that for damage phases for raid specifically, you just have a loadout that you can easily swap to that has Orpheus Rig, and we'll talk about which mods you want to swap that for later in the video to perfectly optimize damage phases. Now that we have exotics covered, let's get into the aspects and the fragments. First off, with the abilities, obviously we want to be using Mobius Quiver, very, very good. And then for the dodge, I'm going to be using Marksman Dodge because we want a lower cooldown, and it's also good for having the on-demand reload for damage phases. If you find that you absolutely need even more smoke bomb charges, Gambler's Dodge is very good here, but you should have more than enough smoke bombs as it is. Triple Jump, obviously the best jump, and for the grenade, Vortex Grenade is obviously the best grenade. If you want to use something else, feel free, but Vortex Grenade is just so good. For the first aspect, obviously we're going to be using Trapper's Ambush here so that our smoke bomb can actually make us invisible. Pretty much a no-brainer there. Something that I want to recommend is if you're actually playing solo and you're doing really easy content, you don't really need Trapper's Ambush. It sounds kind of stupid because we're playing Omnioculus, so we have 2 charges of the smoke bomb, right? But if you're doing like really easy stuff, you don't really need the on-demand invisibility through Snare Bomb, and you could just swap it for Vanishing Step so that anytime you dodge, it makes you invisible if you just want some on-demand invisibility, because this actually gives you the second fragment slot, right? But for 95% of things, just use Trapper's Ambush at all times. So that's Executioner, obvious choice here, 2 fragment slots, and anytime that we defeat a weakened, suppressed, or volatile target, it's going to give us invisibility. This is very good because we're going to have 100% uptime on volatile rounds, so every time that we kill a guy, we then go invisible, and then every time we have invisibility, we gain that resistance, and we're going to be constantly popping in and out of invisibility. You could make an argument for very specific encounters that Vanishing Step could potentially be better for Styles Executioner, just because you want the on-demand invisibility through the dodge, but ultimately you should have more than enough on-demand invisibility with 2 charges of the smoke bomb, and I think it's invaluable being able to go invisible just after killing an enemy so that you can, full heal, reposition, do all sorts of things, and you want to use the dodge with some of our mods to gain cooldown reduction for your grenade and other stuff. When it comes to the fragments, these are pretty straightforward. You want Echo of Undermining just to increase how much damage your grenade does by 15%, and also just weakens targets. Very, very good for contest mode stuff because the enemies are so tanky, so debuffing them by 15%, or making you do 15% more damage rather, incredibly good there. It does give you minus 20 discipline, so if you have a very hard time with your stats, you could potentially swap this off, but I just think having Weaken is just so strong. Then we have Echo of Persistence that is going to increase the duration of not only invisibility, but also any void overshield that we get, and Devour, which we can actually take advantage of all three of these. This is going to increase the duration of our invisibility by 41%. It's going to add 5 seconds to Devour and an extra 5 seconds to any overshield. Of course, with this build, we're going invisible all the time, so this is very, very good for just more consistency and letting invisibility last longer. But also, we're going to be getting Devour with Echo of Starvation, where anytime we pick up an orb, it's going to give us Devour. So increasing the duration on the Devour is very good because Devour is incredibly OP. Not only does just picking up an orb, because it's going to give us Devour, instantly full heal us, but anytime we gain Devour, we're also going to get 20% grenade energy back. Very, very good. This can also proc during like damage phases and stuff, and with all the orbs flying around, you're pretty much just going to full heal with Devour, so that is very nice. On top of that, while you actually have Devour, any subsequent quick kill will also full heal you, and it's going to give you a pretty decent chunk of grenade energy back depending on which type of enemies that you are killing. If you decided to go for Vanishing Step, and if you're playing like Trafalgar or something, for the 4th fragment, you would probably want to go for, I had a hard time finding it, Echo of Cessation, so that anytime you defeat a volatile target, it's going to give you a Void Breach, and then that Void Breach will also count for Devour, but it also gives you some class ability energy back, which is really good. When it comes to the stats, sorry, I forgot to mention this, Hunter is a little bit difficult to build around because you want so many stats of all these different things. The most important thing for higher end content is, of course, getting 100 resilience for all that damage reduction. Next to that, I really like having my grenade on a low cooldown. You can make the argument that getting mobility is really good, but because of some of our mods, having the grenade I think is a little bit better because then we can further reduce the cooldown of our dodge with our grenade, and the dodge is already a really short cooldown as it is. Recovery is pretty good for healing, but we do have healing already in the form of Devour. And because we can just go invisible whenever we want, we don't really need recovery, but it isn't bad at all. Ultimately, I would just prioritize getting resilience, and then discipline, and then mobility, and recovery could be somewhere in that mix. Keep in mind that font mods exist, so for example, I'm only at 70 resilience and 70 discipline, but I'm actually at 100 anytime I have an armor charge because I'm using Font of Focus and Font of Endurance, which gives me 30 of these stats. If you wanted recovery, for example, you could also put on Font of Recovery on your class item. When it comes to the mods, the absolute most important thing with this build is going to be spawning orbs of power, and luckily Hunter has some of the best ways to spawn orbs. The reason that we care about orbs so much is not only is it going to give us our super back, but it's also going to proc volatile rounds, which of course is very pertinent to the build, and it's also going to give us Devour instantly. Like I said, Hunter has probably the best way to spawn orbs in the form of Reaper, where anytime we activate our class ability, which is our dodge, which has a super low cooldown, our next weapon final blow spawns an orb of power. Probably the most consistent way to spawn orbs in the entire game. The next way to spawn orbs is firepower. You could make the argument this is a little bit redundant, but you just get so many orbs, and generally I think it's good to have as many orbs as possible, especially in a raid scenario, just so everybody can proc everything that they're trying to proc with all of their, weapon surges, their armor charges, their volatile rounds, etc. The rest of the mods pretty much just round out the build so that we can get our dodge back insanely quickly, gain some damage reduction, and some damage bonuses. Anyways though, let's just go into every individual piece. So for the helmet, you definitely want to always be running a Siphon of whatever your primary weapon. Because we're a Void build and using volatile rounds, we want Void Siphon. In solo settings, Ashes to Assets, very, very good, just enables you to get your super back ridiculously fast. But if you're in like a raid, Heavy Ammo Scout paired with Heavy Ammo Finder, very good for spawning heavy ammo for all of your teammates. So the gloves, like I mentioned, Firepower, very good for spawning orbs of power. Bolstering Detonation, probably mandatory because it's going to give you 20% of your dodge cooldown back anytime you do damage with a grenade. And we're spamming our grenades like crazy with this build, so this is really good. And then Font of Focus just for the extra 30 discipline. If you have better gear than my crappy Hunter does, you could make the argument for using a loader mod to just increase your reload speed. When it comes to the chest, ideally you just have 3 damage reductions across the board if you're able to get 100 resilience. I don't have 100 resilience, so I went for a font mod, but you could very easily have Concussive Dampener, Sniper, and even a second Concussive Dampener, or something like Void, because a lot of the harder hitting stuff in the game typically is Void. And then for your boots, I'd highly recommend having at least 2 Surge mods here, just to increase the damage of whatever your primary weapon is. And then I have Innervation, just massively reduce the cooldown of our grenade anytime we pick up an orb. I think it's 12% per orb pickup, which is pretty strong. If you want even more survivability, you could go for recuperation, but I do think picking up an orb is already going to full heal you with Devour, right? So this is a little bit redundant. So you could even go for a 3rd weapon surge mod here. For the cloak, we want time dilation to increase our armor charge duration from 10 to 15 seconds, so our weapon surges and our font mods last longer. Reaper, of course, we already mentioned, and Bomber is going to give us 12% of our grenade back anytime we use our dodge. So we have a really nice synergy going between our dodge and our grenade so that we can just spam those like crazy. Like I mentioned earlier, you 100% want a separate loadout that has whatever your damage setup is. So for example, I have Orpheus Rig here, and then because Hothead is going to be my best heavy option, I have 3 arc weapon surges so that my Hothead can do as much damage as humanly possible. Because I had to swap out the chest, I put on a chest that has double concussive dampener, because usually bosses do some form of AoE damage, right? But obviously if the boss is doing like a whole bunch of solar damage or something, swap one of these concussive dampeners to solar resistance. I put on a charged up so that I could just have more stacks of armor charge. Because we're going to be spawning a whole bunch of orbs during damage phases, this is good just so we get a longer duration on any sort of our weapon surges. And you could also make the argument that you could swap out Bomber and whatever the stat mod is to even a second charge of time dilation specifically for damage phases. So again, just make sure that you have a loadout that is a little bit tailored to, damage phase oriented stuff. Put on whatever weapon surge your heavy is specifically. Swap out your damage resistance mods on your chest, and even potentially go for a reserve mod on your chest so that before the encounter you could pop the flag, get a whole bunch of extra ammo, and then swap back to whatever build you plan to use for neutral game. When it comes to our weapon choices, you definitely want your primary weapon to be a void weapon. I really like Wave Splitter, not only because it is a special weapon, but anytime that we pick up an orb, it's going to automatically reload. We're doing that all the time, and it also suppresses. And suppression is just very good because it makes the enemies complete noobs, and it also counts for our Silas Executioner. If you don't want to use the exotic slot here, you could very easily put on something like a Wither Horde instead, and then use Funnel Web, Unforgiven, Hollow Denial with Repulsor Brace, very good. Even Harsh Language. I want to mention how OP Repulsor Brace is if you happen to have a Hollow Denial with one. Repulsor Brace, anytime you kill an enemy that is Void debuffed, it's literally going to give you a full Void Overshield, which gives you even more damage reduction. And because of our fragments, the overshield will last even longer. Feel free to just use whatever, but ultimately I think a blinding GL with a trace rifle that is void is very good, and you shouldn't really have ammo problems. If you do happen to have ammo problems, certainly just put on a primary like a funnel web or something, but double special gives you a crazy amount of heavy ammo. When it comes to your heavy weapon, obviously just use what is best. Unfortunately, I don't have a ton of options. The Hothead is my best option for like raid DPS, but depending on what you're doing, I really like using a corrective measure for just running around melting enemies. Retrofit Escapade with volatile rounds is also very good. Really just depends on the content that you're doing. When it comes to the artifact mods, all you really care about is authorized mods Void and Grenades, so just reduce the cost of those. Volatile Flow for the volatile rounds, of course. Shatter Orbs, very good for just spawning a whole bunch of orbs. And then Bricks from Beyond is probably the best mod in the entire game, or perk I should say, just because it's going to give you a ridiculous amount of heavy ammo. The reason that I don't have my artifact filled up is because for some reason, let me know in the comments if this has been happening to you, but for some reason activating one of these perks, it kept making my volatile rounds literally just stop working, and I ran out of Glimmer trying to test it because the artifact is also bugged and kept costing Glimmer. It got up to like 100k Glimmer, which is ridiculous, so I just said screw it, I'm not going to mess with it anymore. If you guys happen to know what it is, please feel free to let me know in the comments, but once that bug is fixed, I would just spec out the tree with Void Weapon Channeling and then Prismatic Transfer. These aren't really going to do all that much, but might as well. That's pretty much it for the video. If you enjoyed, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe for videos similar to this one, and check out all of my other build videos on the channel. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you guys later. Peace.